that triangle integrates. We have a guest with us today, and I just want to invite her to a set as she introduces herself. Just gives us a brief about who she is before we get the discussion on the road. Karibu.
Thank you. So my name is Ruth Kiereini, though many people know me as Jerry Kiereini. I have been in the public policy space for quite a number of years. And when I talk about being in the public policy space, I have been heavily involved in building the business community through lobbying for a better business environment. Meaning if there are issues with whatever in the economy or taxes, whatever, we work with business membership organizations to help them to know how to approach policymakers. So I have been in that space for a while. I have also been working with the media very closely. And of course, I've done other work with certain organizations in the mashinani, trying to raise the consciousness of people to know that the development in their community starts with them, and to have grass-led policy making. Yes, so that's what I have been doing for the last 15 years.
Excellent.
Yes. Thank you, Ruth.
You know, I think I raised this with you earlier. One of the hot discussions, the hot potatoes this week has been Governor Waiguru and a shift to UDA, you know. What do you make of that? Is that a plus? Is that a minus? What do you make of that?
I think to look at it in terms of whether it's a plus or a minus is quite simplistic. Okay. It's a simplistic way of looking at the issue. I think what you're seeing now in the political realm is typical of every election cycle. So just before you get into a campaign, there's lots of jostling, lots of shifting from one political party or the other. I think in Anne Waiguru's case, it's her prerogative to decide which side she wants to stand on, where does she feel her bread is buttered. And if she feels that that is a place where she's going to get mileage or achieve her objectives, then I'm all for it. By all means, I think we live in a democracy and people have the freedom to make the decisions that they want. I just wish her all the best. Okay.
There's been, I think since yesterday, there's been this discussion about whether, because yesterday in the press, what we saw was, you know, court cases beginning to come up, and it's beginning to look like it was because it is of her political moves. That's why these cases are coming up. So already you can begin to see stones being thrown. The government is being painted in a bad light. Comments. What are your thoughts?
Well, you see, in any political battle, narratives must be built to support your position. Okay. Yes, it looked like it was timed, like it was the day after. But we cannot run away from the fact that Anne Waiguru has got skeletons in her closet. Whether she has to deal with them now or later, it doesn't do away with the fact that that is the case. So whether it is timed or, I mean, I can't say anything because I don't know who is behind what. All right, okay. But again, you see, sometimes also the press, you know, drives certain narratives. Okay. And I guess it's still also their job and their role. I mean, that's what happens in a vibrant democracy.
Okay. But is it also a statement? Because our focus today is really women and politics and maybe what role the church can play. Is it a statement, a representation of the way we as a nation view women in politics?
I don't think that's the case in this situation. Okay. I don't think it's discriminatory of women in any way. Like I said, she's got her skeletons, and it is from the time when she started in government. It's not even about, you know, necessarily her being now a governor. Even as a governor, she had her issues. So I think it's just, you know, at some point you take risks, and you know, choices have consequences. So if she has to deal with her past, then she must. So I really don't think it has anything to do with the fact that she is a woman. It has everything to do with the role she had been given, and what she did while she was holding those positions. And if there's something that has gone wrong, then she must answer. It's just that simple, but has nothing to do with her as a woman.
Okay. Okay, shifting from the Waiguru issue, generally one of the things maybe I'll commend her for, and not just her alone, I think this past dispensation has had about 3 women governors, you know, a number of women who have found their way into the Senate. So what we're beginning to increasingly see is more and more women beginning to throw their hat into the ring, especially where politics is concerned. By the time you're seeing 3 women governors, it's not a statement of how many women stood. There must be a number of women who stood for election during that cycle. What is changing? Are women becoming bolder about stepping into politics? What do you think is driving this?
Well, first of all, I think due to the fact that there's been a push for affirmative action over a number of years, pushing governments, many governments around the world to put women in leadership, I think that has created the environment for women leadership to grow. Number one. Number two, I think we're also seeing a number of women who are growing in confidence and choosing to take on leadership roles because they've seen this vacuum. There's a vacuum for a certain kind of leadership, number one. Number two, I also feel that ladies and women nowadays are more competent. We've gone to school. We've worked. Okay. We have experienced the traditional and stereotypical view of women to stay home, take care of children. I mean, in the time of my mother, for example, where even their career options were so limited. You're either a secretary or a teacher or a housewife. It's so different now. And so with that, then women are growing in confidence, knowing that they can take on leadership positions and do a good job at it. So there are a number of factors. It's just where the world is heading, the opportunities that are available for women. And so I find that it's only inevitable that women would want to rise.
When I look at Kenya, and yesterday I was just looking at statistics, and they were comparing Kenya with the East Africa region generally in terms of Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania. And one of the statements that came out, especially where women in politics are concerned, is that we have a smaller percentage of women representation in the political sphere, in the leadership sphere. So I find that interesting because Kenya is supposed to be, in this region, is supposed to be one of the front runners. Our economy is probably the most vibrant in the region. In terms of democracy, I think we probably could be argued that probably we are probably number one, number two in terms of our democratic, space and the freedom that we've opened up to media and so on and so forth. But yet when it comes to women, we are lagging behind. I find that an interesting dichotomy or dilemma. Is that a statement about that we are not that far ahead, or is it? Can you speak into that?
It's a paradox.
Yes.
Because, yes, I know in Rwanda they have managed to achieve their two-third gender rule without any issues. In our parliament, it has been an issue up and down, and every time it goes onto the floor of the House, it is rejected. And the kind of perspective you get from those kind of things is that the patriarchy is still in control in Kenya. I think we are a very unique society. In fact, if you remember, Michael Joseph once said that Kenyans are peculiar people, and I tend to believe that we are, because with you're rightly pointing out, in terms of our economy, we're ahead. In fact, I think in terms of our human capital, we're also ahead. Our democracy is very vibrant. There's freedom of speech here, freedom of expression, which is unlike what you probably find in Rwanda or even in Tanzania or Uganda, our neighbors. And so why is it that women are not rising? It might speak more to even the style sometimes of how I see the women leaders in our neighboring countries. For example, did we ever imagine that Suluhu would become the president of Tanzania? And it was like she was a shadow. We didn't even see her. It was Magufuli first and then Magufuli second. So now look at her and look at what she's doing for East Africa. She's bringing a very peaceful spirit to regional relations. She seems to be a lady who's able to hold herself in a humble stature. And I'm not saying that assertive women are not better leadership than she is, but she's bringing a different kind of leadership style, which is more reconciliatory. And I think it also, she's aware of the circumstances within East African relations, and she knows that, we need to integrate more than, be isolated. So I think she's very astute in knowing what she needs to do this time. Now, in terms of Kenya, I don't know whether it is a question of we've had this freedom for so long that maybe we're taking it for granted. I don't know. All right. But I think it still points back to the question of leadership style, which I think we might need to have a critical look at. One of the things that when I was thinking about coming to this interview today was, what is the issue? What are some of the issues that we're having in Kenya? I think what we haven't had is a sufficient supply of role models.
Okay.
We're not saying that there have not been other women in politics. We've had people like Beth Mugo who have been in politics for a long time. We even had Julia Jambo, politics for a long time as well. We now have Anne Waiguru, we also have Martha Karua, people who've been there for a long time. And I'm not saying that, that they haven't been role models, but maybe the question of mentoring or even describing to other women who would like to come into leadership what it takes, what are the pitfalls, what are the challenges, what is society going to expect of you. Without that kind of role modeling, then it will discourage women, because what we see is what the media paints of our women leaders. But when we speak to them on one-on-one, you realize they're just like you. They have the same challenges. They have families that they need to take care of. And then they still have to go and do battle on the floor of the house. And they still have to go and do battle during campaigns. So what's the difference between now how a man would approach this and how a woman would approach this? I think it has a lot to do with societal expectations. But if we had more role models coming out and saying, listen, you too can rise, but it's going to be this challenging, and let's hold your hand and take you forward, then perhaps we'll have more leaders.
Wow. I like that thought of the whole aspect of role models. I just wanted to shift into a church a bit, because I think sometimes that what you see in society is a reflection of what you see in the church. So if you're arguing, for example, that we're having an issue with leadership and women in leadership in society, then probably that's a reflection of what's going on in the church. Do you feel, from your perspective, from where you sit, that there are enough role models that women in the church have who, for lack of a better word, who encourage them, to take new territory, encourage them to take new ground, who encourage them to, for example, to jump into politics? Just from your perspective, is that something that is lacking in the church?
You see, when I look at the political realm and then I look at the church, they're both different in the way they are set up. But there are certain things about them that are similar and yet not. The political realm, and I'll talk about this from a Christian perspective, is spiritual. Then when you come to the church, you find out the church is also political.
Okay.
So when you sit with, if you come to a certain church, there's one church that will say women should not preach at all. They should be silent. There'll be the question of, can we have bishops in this church? No. Others will say women must sit at the back. The church has its own legalism and legalistic way of looking at these things. For me, I would take, like, for example, the verses in the Bible that say women should not preach. What I think we are not doing in the church is taking that verse and contextualizing it in the time when Paul was saying this. At the same time, what was the culture at the time? What was going on in that church? There was a lot of bickering. There was a lot of whatever, which is still what we are seeing nowadays in the church. So if you find churches that are still sticking, women must not, I think you are really missing the point here. The Bible is giving us the word of the Lord, but at the same time, we are supposed to seek wisdom about how to apply it in your current circumstance. And so for that, I think the church has been letting women down. You'll find very vibrant churches where, yes, women are in the lead. You'll find others where you cannot speak. There was a time I went to a church and I could tell, without even knowing what their doctrine is, I could tell that here women don't speak, because even if they're in the worship team, there's no one who is a worship leader. We're just one, And I asked myself, is it because they don't want women to talk here? And every time we had somebody preaching, it was only men. I didn't even see a woman on the pulpit. So I'm wondering what's going on here. Unless she was coming to read a Bible verse, and then you go back and sit down.
So they're teaching women humility.
Humility. I don't know.
Okay.
So, I think the church they're not playing their role.
Okay.
And I think for a long time is because the emphasis has been, okay, let us just save souls and let's wait for the rapture. When is it coming? Forgetting that even though we are here, we're not supposed to be part of the world, but we are here. And Jesus says we should be the salt. So what are we doing? And he didn't say you should be some type of salt. He said you are the salt. And if you're not salt, then you're not. So if we are not doing it, then we are not the salt. If we're not standing and raising women and saying we want to support you, what do we need to do for you? What are the challenges women get? First of all, financing. How do we finance campaigns? We don't have the money. It's difficult for men. Can you imagine how much more difficult it is for women? That's number one. Number two, you need support. The community needs to support you. And if you go into a place and say, oh, that one is a politician, do you know how those people are? If you are going to start denigrating her from the church, where she's supposed to get the spiritual support, prayers, and even financial support, then how do you expect her to go out there and rise and be the salt? She can't, because already she has been disabled. At the same time, she needs support. She might have a family. How do we support her and her family in her pursuing the role of a leader? So I think the church has to wake up. It's not a question of we're sitting here and waiting, beam me up, Scotty. No, no, no.
Okay. Okay.
We need to sincerely think about what do we want. We don't engage in civil education. We've had a voters' drive. I don't know if anybody in the churches is speaking about it. Are you talking to people to go and get their votes? Are you telling them where they can go? Are you telling them why it's important for them to get votes, their votes? They're not engaged in that. I also see churches shy away from discussing political issues, civil issues, but we must. Otherwise, what are we saying? Are we holier than thou? At the same time, we want to enjoy the facilities that are given to us by the government. We'll complain. We'll say there are no roads, there are no this. Electricity bills are so high. We can't get water. So what are you doing about it? You're going to church and praying? Continue praying. But what do you need to do to make sure that you get water in your homestead? Or you make sure that there's power, that your neighbor can get power, that there's security? What do? You must take action. And so I think the church is deluding itself and pretending, or maybe not realizing, that their role is more paramount now than ever. Yeah.
I like your second point, that I prefer that, that maybe we're not deluding, we're actually not realizing,
Exactly.
not walking up to the reality.
Yeah.
I think many people have said that the church is a sleeping giant.
Yes.
We have so much potential within ourselves, but we've not really realized how to activate that potential. Maybe the day we realize how to activate that potential, things will change. But back to the church supporting women in politics. I think that's an interesting issue, because we already have an issue supporting politics as itself. Before we start talking about supporting women in politics, we already have an issue supporting politicians generally. If somebody came up in my church and said, I want to stand for this seat, I'd ask them, are you ready? They'd go through some sort of level of grilling before you release them into that position. So if that is the way it is generally, how much more difficult is it with women? But you mentioned the challenges. What challenges do women in politics go through? What makes it different for them compared to men?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, finances is a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to get finances, whether you're a man or a woman, to support a campaign. It's very, very expensive. It's not something that you can go and say, I'm trying, because that will be a sure way of losing. You need the financial support. But besides that, I think, women find themselves in a bit of a quagmire sometimes, because the political realm is very, very competitive, and it can get nasty. There's a lot of aggression, and mainly because it is male-dominated. So a woman going into politics will find herself questioning, how do I tackle this? Do I go head-on and be aggressive with this man? And if you do that, society is going to say, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. You don't normally, you don't do that. At the same time, the community has a way they see you. When a mama, how is a woman supposed to behave? They might come and say, is she married? Does she have children? Does she have a family? The idea is that if she's married, she's got children, she's more stable. So there are all these stereotypes. They put us in boxes, and you have to be cognizant of this is the way they see me, because at the end of the day, you still have to be popular. You can stand with a good manifesto. You can talk about things that you say you feel that society needs. And you could be believable, and people know that you can do it. But there are still certain expectations that, she's still a woman. There's the way a woman is supposed to behave. There's the community expectations of her. So, you have to be very aware of what is going on around you. And that should be able to help you navigate, because it's like a labyrinth. It's not easy. And when you now ask me about that, some leaders come to mind. For example, Margaret Thatcher rose to become one of the longest-serving and women prime ministers, and very effective. You have people like Indira Gandhi, who also led India through some very tumultuous times. You have people like Hillary Clinton, who said, we're going to smash the glass ceiling.
Okay.
And now we have Kamala Harris, who is in... now in the US. But look at all these women. Did Margaret Thatcher get voted in as Margaret Thatcher? No. She went in with the Conservative Party. Indira Gandhi Was she voted in as Indira Gandhi? Did she just come out of nowhere? No. Her father had preceded her. Nehru was her father. Hillary Clinton. Did she just come out as Hillary Clinton? No. She was the first lady, you see. And now Kamala Harris. Have we voted her in as Kamala Harris? No. She is now the vice president. So when you look at the pattern, what is it saying? That women need to come through a vehicle of some sorts. Like somebody has to go ahead of them for them to rise to those positions. And that's why I'm saying that you have to be cognizant of the situation in which you are in. If that is the way to get to the top of the party, then you become the PM, then that's what you need to do. So you have to be aware of your dynamics, come up with strategies, do not be naive, and then, you know, just get into it.
Well, I like that direction you've taken, because I think many women tend to want to fight against the grain. You know, we want to come up. In fact, one of our women politicians was called the Iron Lady, because she was so tough, you know, and she was tough as nails. And she did make her impact, I think, in her constituency. But at the end of the day, is that the best model? Is that the best pattern to follow? And if we're trying to encourage our women in the church to stand, what model, what pattern would they follow? So I like that perspective, that if we need a vehicle, that women need a vehicle. Now, bringing that back from out there to our local environment, what kind of vehicles do women have? Is it just, when I look around, is it just parties? Is it, are there other vehicles? What mediums they have to get themselves to the front? You know,
First of all, I think the challenges we have in our country where the parties are concerned is the parties are not, they're not built on, like, you know, ideologies, and, you know, they don't build parties in these countries like institutions. You see, like the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, those are institutions that have been there for a long time. The Democrats, or the, you know, they've been there for a long time. The Republicans. Here it's just, tunataka kupiga debe, register, get your voters, nini na twende. You see, once that has finished, exhausted its usefulness, we start another one. So I don't think the party is the one that is going to help women to rise. I still think because we're still so communally based, then it will, if I was the church and saying, if I was part of the church in leadership and saying we want to raise this woman, then I think it is up to us to, as a church, to use our church as the vehicle and the platform, for example, and use that to give her the support that she needs. Also, what women need to realize is the media is very good at painting narratives. One day they'll be your friend, and the other day they won't. And it doesn't really matter to them whether you're a good person or not. Don't sit back and just let the media carry the narrative. There are so many platforms for you. There's all these online platforms. There's Facebook, there's YouTube, there's, you know, you can start your own platform where you start talking to people and expressing your ideas and showing them your life, what it is you want to do. So we need to also just take responsibility for ourselves and say, what platforms do I have at my disposal that I can use right now to promote what I believe in? So there's a lot that they can do on those platforms. But I certainly don't think the political parties is the way to go. Even if you were to say, let's change the governmental system, like we've tried with the two-third gender rule, you can see how much difficulty. And then, of course, there was the issue of whether should we do BBI, should we stick to this? BBI would have given us many more leadership positions, which we could jostle for, so that women can now become, you know, there's more variety for them. But that also now is hanging in the balance. So I think we still have a long way to go. But we must also just take responsibility as women and see what do we have at our disposal that we can use. Do you rise in, you know, like the development world until you're recognized for your work? Do you join the civil service? And but mostly, I think if I'm speaking to young ladies now, I would say start in campus.
Wow.
If there's a student association, get into it. Understand politics from that level. And once you get out of there, yes, look for a party. Join them. Even if this, you know, it has its own hula baloo, join them. If it means you want to get into government. So I would advise young women to start early, looking for which vehicles work for them.
So you're not for the idea of an independent woman who stands on her own, you know, on her own to sort of pave a way or to chart a way forward?
That is not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because even a woman standing up and saying, I want to do this, she can. I have nothing against that. It's just that we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are going to be challenges and they are going to be different from the men. And in a society like ours where, the patriarchy is still very strong, if you come out like that, expect blows. And now the question is, will you be able to take it? Because then it can affect your family, it can even break marriages. You have to be aware of the risks that are involved. And so it requires a lot of wisdom and strategy. There's going to be a time to be tough. There's going to be a time to bring the softer side of leadership. There's going to be a time for you to follow, and there'll be a time for you to take the lead. So it's a question of being aware. When do I take the lead? When do I sit back? And sometimes it requires patience. You might need to sit back for a little while until the moment presents itself. In the case of Suluhu, until the moment, then you now come out in all your glory, the way God created you. And at that point in time, you'll be ready for it.
Yeah. One of the maybe it's a male argument. One of the arguments is that maybe Suluhu is not pursuing Magufuli's agenda. Magufuli was very combative, very anti cartels, and sort of brought down a lot of those systems that were in control of Tanzania. The jury is still out, I know, but there's been that question about whether her style is really promoting the Magufuli legacy. I mean, this second term, her first term as a presidency, which would have been Magufuli's second term, is really an extension of Magufuli's term. So don't you think she should be actually pursuing Magufuli's agenda?
Whether Suluhu likes it or not, or whether we like it or not, she's a transitionary president, just because of the fact that she found herself where she did. And when you find yourself in that kind of a situation, then you have to be very, very careful how you play your cards. We initially wondering, is she going to follow Magufuli? But immediately she came out, she's mask mandate, yes, we have COVID, yes, get vaccinated. So already was like, oh, she's deviating. And then from there, she started coming to the neighboring countries, being reconciliatory and what. I think she'll be a very interesting case study. The jury is still out, like you're saying. I think she is a woman who has Tanzanians' best interests at heart. I think that we can say without a shadow of a doubt. But she also faces unique challenges. Remember, the government that she was coming to take over was Magufuli's government.
That's true.
And you need your men behind you, your men or women behind you. So you cannot come and become also very aggressive in the opposite direction, saying, no, we're going to go this way. You also have to take cognizance that they had a different kind of leader, different kind of leadership style, he had a different kind of agenda, and you have to be aware of that. Otherwise, you can risk not having a government. Then at the end of the day, what are we doing?
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just want to take a break for a few minutes. Thank you very much. The discussion continues, women in politics, and at the end of the day, what role does the church have to play in this? After the break, we want to continue discussing especially the place of family, because when women get hit in politics, they are not the only ones who are hit. Their family are hit as an extension of that. But don't go away. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
This November, a gathering of music ministers from all over East Africa. It's Kenya Music Tabernacle of Grace City of Hope at City Square House behind Kenya Cinema, Nairobi, Kenya. Also ministering Jackie Kelvin, Rosemary Njage, Size 8 Reborn, Anthony Musambi, Messalina, Promise Prince, Agusan Sunday, Irene Seeger, and many more.
Hi there, music is beyond the melody, the rhythm, and even the lyrics. Music is spiritual. The gospel in this end time will only travel to the ends of the earth, except on the wings of music. My name is Marvel Jokes. I'm an international music minister, an author, and also a teacher of the word. Do not want to miss this meeting for anything wherever you are. I'll see you in Kenya.
This conference will also be aired live on YouTube at Marvel Jokes TV. Do subscribe and connect live.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us today on this discussion. We're talking about women, politics, and the church, and we're looking at that triangle and just exploring how that triangle can be facilitated, especially from the church side, so that we can have more women engaging in the political arena and in the political space. So just before the break, Ruth was just talking to us about the challenges, some of the challenges that women go through when they're in politics. And one of the things that she mentioned or she insinuated was that men need to support.
Even though people made fun of him and said, oh, he's just there with the apron behind the sink doing whatever. Where every time she sat down and she had to look at, financial papers, find out what's going on in the economy, and he was, good at finances, he would tell her, this is what you need to do. This is the decision you need to make. If you cut this out, this is what's going to happen. And he helped her interpret the implications of some of her policy decisions. So men have a very, very, very important role to play in the role in a woman's ambition to be a leader. Men have a very important role to play. They give you that second opinion, a different way of looking at things. At the same time, your husband should be able to give you emotional support, because it's very difficult out there when everybody is coming for you and coming for the jugular. He needs to be able to give you that kind of support. He also needs to be able to make sure that the family is also intact. And you see, with that, sometimes you find that men would not want their wives to go into politics because it makes them insecure, like, I'm going to lose her. She's going to go and... But they need to understand what their role is in the event, because not everybody is blessed with the, gifts of leadership. If your wife has been gifted with, she can speak, she's articulate, she knows what she's got the experience, and she has what the promise that this country needs, then you as a husband must really rally behind her. But understand that we are not saying we're relegating to the back or that you're the shadow. No. You are an integral part of the future and success of your wife. And if a man stands behind a woman, there's a lot of sanity. Let's say, let me not say sanity, maybe that's the wrong word, but there's a lot of peace that comes with knowing you have that kind of support at home. That even if you come from a hard day's work, people have been shouting you on the floor of the house, there's somebody to come home to and talk to. So there's a lot of support that men can give their wives. And so I would like to encourage men to just, support your wives. See what she can do. You might be very surprised that you breed the next president of this country without you realizing.
I will support my daughter. Maybe the next president of this country. Yes. But so it means that if we're to counsel women as a church who are about to enter into politics, we also need to counsel the men.
Yes.
And get them prepared for what is going to happen.
You definitely need to do that. And the way you need to do it as a church is to bring in people who are in that field, and so that they give you the realistic perspective. This is what it means. And you are going to need to surrender certain things so that she can rise. And you tell the lady that you also need to consider that there are still people at home, and you need to know how to balance it as much as possible. So yes, the church needs to provide that kind of counseling to prepare them, and also the children as much as possible. Yeah. On, this is what is going to happen in mommy's life, but it doesn't mean this. And also, a support. If people need to talk, it's becoming too much. Where do they go to? They need to come back to the church.
You raised something very interesting, because I think when women enter politics, one of the groups that suffers is the family. It's the man and it's the children. And many times I think we forget about the role what children have to go through, especially if your child is young, and your mother is being called all sorts of names outside there in the public domain, and some of this information has a way of filtering back to the schools that they're in, have a way of filtering back to their friends, and sometimes children can be very mean one to another. Any ideas, any suggestions on how that can be handled? How would you deal with that? Assuming it was you going into politics, how would you deal with that with your children? Yeah.
I think if it was me going into politics, I'm a mother, first of all, of 3 children, and they're teenagers. So, in my view, this is just my personal view, if a woman wants to get into politics, then I would advise, raise your children in the first years, because those are really the most important years as you build yourself. Because this is a long-term, you need to have a long-term strategy. So first, raise your children. If your intention is to have a family, then raise them up to a certain point where you can have sober discussions, and they're at a level where they can understand certain things. Like in my case now, I have 3 teenagers. They understand what's going on in the world. They have their own issues, which we discuss on a daily basis. So I would encourage parents who are intending to go into politics to have a very close relationship with their children and talk, and not to assume that they have not seen certain things, and not to assume that they do not understand. Because children understand far much more than we realize as parents. But at the same time, they are very resilient. Because if you talk to a lot of families where they've had challenges, you find children really can't survive. It's easy to just say, oh, the children will hear this, that's collateral damage. No. It behooves the parent who is at home, whether it is the wife or the husband, to even spend more time with the children. There's also the temptation sometimes to send your children off to boarding school because of, the challenges of what comes with being in leadership. Not a bad idea either, but at the same time, you still need to keep the connection alive with your children. Don't just say, okay, I need somebody else to take care of you for the time being. As I do this, you might lose your children in the process. But and unfortunately, in many political families, that has been the case. But if you look at the Obamas, they were always everywhere with their children. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible. It just requires different kind of sacrifice, balance between wife and husband. If you saw how Michelle was supporting Obama, she was always there. She was a woman leader in her own right. She has her own respect, gained her own respect in the community. And their children also grew and, they were brought up well. Yes, so it's a question of knowing how to do the balancing.
Okay. So it's a bit more difficult. It's not as straightforward when a woman wants to jump into politics. There are a number of more issues to begin to consider and think about.
Yes.
I think during the break we discussed, and you mentioned how women are the one who shoot themselves in the foot. They are the worst enemies. And that has actually been also another interesting bit, because I was listening to this show, and they talk about how the majority of the voters in any election are usually women. Women are the one who determines who gets into power. In fact, one of the leading presidential contenders, it's been suggested that he should get a woman as the running mate so that he can sort of galvanize or rally the women vote around him. And yet, women being the majority of the voters or the majority of the electorate, yet we don't find a lot more women finding their way into power. It means that the people who are letting you down are women themselves. It's not the men who are letting the women down, it's the women who are letting themselves down. What do you have to say about that, and how do we start changing that dynamic?
Yeah, it's very easy to say, women are their own worst enemy, without having to go into looking at exactly what is going on. Because, it's easy to just say, oh, they're the own worst enemy, so chana now. But the truth is, yes, we have many women in this country, and they have the potential to change the leadership of this country, to change, actually, a huge paradigm shift in this country. Every woman got out and said, I'm going to vote. But I think we don't investigate, really, what would be the motivation for this woman. Because the understanding has been that in a household, the man is the one who will decide, tunapigia nani kura. And we are all going to do that. And especially like from where I come from, Central, as we do dhuti. You're told it's like that, it's everybody, what you are told and you go, and it's everybody. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at the same time, we vote as a bloc. But I think we need to investigate a little further to see what can motivate our women to say, I have the power to change what's going on in my society. It has a lot to do with development. If she understood that if I vote in this person, I'll be able to have my water in the community, then she would say there's something at stake for me and my children. If she understood that if we vote in this person, then we're going to have a good marketplace where I can sell my vegetables, make my living, and go back home. So we need to conscientize women, raise their awareness to what their vote means for their society. Not because they've been told by their husband, utafanya hivi. And we're not also saying that women should go against their husbands. But if they have a fundamental understanding of what it means to vote, then perhaps they'll also persuade their husbands in the right direction. And why am I telling you this? I used to work in Narok some years back, trying to change the attitude of the society against FGM. This was something that was pushed by the men, and the women felt they were not able to do much because it is expected. By the time you turn 8, you must go for the cut. After that, you're a marriageable woman, and dowry is exchanged, and the girl goes. It took us talking to the women asking them to explain to us what was the issue. Then we realized we need now to go and talk to the men. And we didn't send men to go and talk to them. We went as women and talked to them and explained, this is what is going to happen if you take your daughter to school, rather than do this. So, women have a role also in changing how the household thinks. But we need to start by raising their conscience to the power that they have and understanding that my vote directly translates to a better life, to a better school for my children, to more money, to a better marketplace. And if we can spend time educating Wamama, then perhaps we'll see a change in the way they do their voting.
So voter education is key as we go forward.
And, targeted to women. Don't just blanket.
Okay.
And don't just blanket it, but understand what are her fears. Why wouldn't she do it? Does she understand why it's important? So it has to be really tailor-made to speak to women.
Okay. So back to the church. What role do you see the church playing in all this? What responsibility does the church have in empowering the women, in getting them out there? You've raised two issues. One issue you've raised is women in leadership. So in empowering women to stand for leadership, and number two, in empowering women to vote. What role does the church have to play in this?
Every church lives in a community. It's found in every community. Let's say every community has a church, not the other way around. Yeah. Every community has a church. I think churches need to start looking at the environment they are in and see what impact can we make. We're not saying that bring a politician into the pulpit and let him speak to the people, or bring the lady politician to the pulpit and let her speak to the people. Don't turn it into a rallying campaign, because as it is, you've seen the backlash in the last couple of months when churches have been doing that, wondering what's going on here. That's not what we're advocating for. What I'm saying is, if you are able as a church to look at your community, you can have town hall meetings. What is stopping us from having town hall meetings within our environment, which the church is driving? Because they say, yes, we've looked at this manifesto, we like what they are saying, this is what it means for this community. Host town hall meetings. Those are some of the best places to have voter education and also for people to interact with these leaders. Not a rally, not the rallies, it's just shouting, and it's charging people, but have town halls. We don't have many town halls anymore, because everybody thinks if you're not on Facebook, if it's TV, it has to be TV, it has to be radio. But town hall meetings would really make a difference in getting people to understand. You'd rather have a smaller number of people who become your advocates than, going and just shouting. And at the end of the day, the people want their 20 bob or their 50 bob, which is typical of our political rallies. Yeah.
Excellent. Do women make better leaders than men? I think that's a very interesting question. Some schools of thought argue that women do make better leaders because they're better managers. And when you invest in a woman, you invest in a family. When you invest in a man, the first thing the man thinks about, and forgive me, I'm a man, so I can speak from that, is a bigger shoe, a bigger car, a bigger house.
Yeah, bigger watch. Yes.
So do women make better leaders?
Probably the best way to answer that is to give you my personal experience. Yeah. I have also been an employer. And every time I was looking to employ, recruiting, I say, first of all, can I get, I'd hope to get women. In the CVs would come, and the first thing I would do is put the women aside, put the men aside. And then I would look and see, how many years has she worked, is she married, whatever. I went and hired more women than men in my department because I saw a consistency in their diligence. They were very committed to their work. If they knew they needed to come into the office early, because I run a sales force. If they knew they needed to come to the office early, they came. If I needed to call a personal meeting with them, they came, because they had an understanding that what I'm making here is what will feed my children tomorrow. It was even more evident with a woman who is single. She has got children to feed, she does not have a husband to rely on, so she took her job seriously. So yes, women do make better workers in the long run because of a different understanding of life. That doesn't mean that they're per se better leaders than men. I think what we need to do is to appreciate how the difference in the sexes are able to work together in leadership to achieve objectives. There's no way in this country we're ever going to get to our destiny without women. Even if you just go back to biblically, when Adam was created and he was given the job, name all the animals. He named. But he was created after God's own kind, meaning when he's in his image. And out of all those, there was no one, there was nothing that was going to give him the kind of satisfaction that a woman would have given him. And that is why God said, now lay it down, let me now create a gift for you to come and help you, not to be Nyumayako, but to help you and walk with you.
Yeah, don't forget that woman is the one who helped him eat the tree in the middle of the garden.
Those are other issues now.
All right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Which, that will always, obviously you're going to say that she's the one who went and ate the apple. It was not Adam.
We would not be here. We would not be having this discussion.
So humanity is dumb.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So, what that story just points out to what I'm saying, that there are the differences in the sexes. There was the way Eve saw that situation, which Adam did not see. But at the same time, Adam must abandon his responsibility. But anywho, if you want to talk about it. But you see, at the end of the day, I would not want to say that women are better than men. It's just that we bring a different style of leadership into it. And I think in any institution, if you want stability, you need to have women in leadership positions. They give you a different perspective. We are kinder in looking at the way we look at things. We are more communal in the way we see things. Men are competitive, they are aggressive, and it's still okay because you are actually the ones who are supposed to go and open the frontiers. Then we follow. And I'm not saying that a woman also cannot be a pioneer, but it's a question of knowing how to balance it. So I would not want to say women are better than men. I just want to say that each sex is very good at what they do. We just need to be cognizant of how we are different, and we support each other in our differences. Yeah.
I did a course in leadership, and they talked about how, leadership is situational. So maybe, like you're saying, when we need to break into new ground, it is easier for a man to do that because by nature, the man is competitive and aggressive.
Exactly.
But when it comes to maintaining and having a more holistic view, I think the women would make better leaders at that.
Yes. And in the day, the age and time we're living in right now, we're looking at, the key words are transformative. And even in leadership, there's also transformative leadership. That is taking all those other types of leadership and putting them into one. So for us to achieve transformative leadership, it cannot happen with men exclusively or women exclusively. We must work together to have transformational leadership.
Excellent, brilliant. And I think that is maybe one of the pluses that Suluhu brought to the table.
Exactly.
The whole reconciliatory approach, the whole, I think one of the arguments against Magufuli was that he ostracized, separated up, drove a lot of people away from the table. But Suluhu is bringing them to the table to help build a better Tanzania. Again, the jury is still out, but that's a good perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. What other strengths do women bring into leadership? You've talked about familial issues. You've talked about reconciliatory. What other strengths that you see them bringing to the table? What can we expect, especially as more women begin to enter into parliament? Because one of the things I have seen, one of my observations, as I was listening to one of our female politicians yesterday, and I'm not going to name names, but she was talking about how she was undressed in parliament, and I know her as a very combative politician. Maybe my perspective is a bit wrong. And one of the concerns I've had is that many women are getting into politics and doing politics the way men do their politics. And I think that should change. I think everybody should play to their strengths. Because a man's strength is energy, is aggression. Let him play to his strengths. I think the women should also play to their strengths. Do you want to speak into that?
Yes. I know who you're talking about. And I actually, at one point, got an opportunity to speak to her personally, and I was very surprised at the reception I received. She was very kind. We had a very nice conversation. There were no interruptions, typical of politicians. They have no time. She had the time. She was graceful. And I said, this lady that I'm talking to, the media shows me something so different. Yeah. And again, I think, yes, it could be because of the leadership style that she has adopted. But in her nature, it's actually very pleasant. That was a very pleasant surprise for me. But, this idea of going with the men head on, unfortunately, if we do that as women, we lose. Because that is not how we were created to relate with men. We're supposed to be, the softer side, and the tougher side is on the men's side. But if women understood their role, then they would know that it's so crucial in establishing trust, especially in the government. When they see a woman who's consistent, she's going to do what she says, Fine, the men are fighting it out there, but here's somebody who's, yes, I will make sure that it is done. I will follow up. I will do, you know, just the way women work. That way of working is very crucial in establishing trust. And trust is a very important currency when you're talking about whether we're going to vote for you or where are we going as a country. You know, if you're going to say you're going to take development back to the mashinani, people have to trust that you're going to do it. So it's important for ladies to understand that they are very, very crucial in fostering that trust. And if they're able to take that role and come out and express themselves in a way that people can believe and see that they mean what they say in their actions, then I think we can go a long way in also promoting more women in leadership and perhaps also changing the way men do things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. I think if we change, because there must be a sober head at the table, you know, so when the men are getting intoxicated with power and so on, I think somebody must be sober. You know, in a house or in a home, when the man begins to misbehave and to do all sorts of crazy things, usually it's the woman who remains sober, and the woman is a way of escape, you know, is an escape avenue, an escape route in the middle of all that, all the issues that are going on in that home. And I think the same thing needs to happen in society. That yes. when our men are going overboard in some areas, we need to, the women need to come with a sober solution, you know, a sober answer, a sober perspective yes. in the middle of all this. Yeah.
And you know, in doing that, then you're able to establish dialogue.
Yeah.
See, dialogue is not talking one way. It's now, you know, the back and the forth. And dialogue is what is going to take us to the next level so we can understand each other and know what we need to do as a country and as a nation. So women are able, and if you just bring it back to the family unit, if you have children, you'll understand. When the children are in trouble, they don't go to daddy. They first say, Mom, Ebu, go and tell daddy it was like this and like this and like this, so that she can foster peace in the home and find a way of, you know, bringing back peace and daddy to calm down.
Okay.
So, you know, it happens in nature. So why can't we adopt the same approach in leadership?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that maybe that's also what women need to be taught to, or encouraged to be and to do, because again, this whole combative approach, maybe it's the media narrative, it could be the media narrative.
Could be the media, yes.
But this whole combative approach is really making it look like there's no one sober in this whole thing. And yet I believe that the women, one of the reasons why they need to be at the table is because they're supposed to help us in terms of just developing soberness and having a sober approach to issues.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Just to wind up, just parting shots. You know, women have been rising of late, you know, the last few years. They say these days when you see a big car on the roads, you know, most likely it's a woman driving it rather than a man. Women have been rising. We've been seeing more women getting involved in politics. We've been seeing more, you know, women taking places of prominence. We've been seeing more women leaders in Africa, you know, and across the board generally. I think that there's something that God is doing about women in this season. And I think that God is bringing out the grace of women in this season. And that's why I expect as we go in the coming years to see more and more women getting into place of influence. What are your parting shots? You know, what are your final words or final thoughts as we prepare to wind up this meeting? Yeah.
Indeed, I think God has stored his, let's say his women.
That's where you're going. I could see you going to best wine.
Yeah, I was going to say he stored his best wine.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, let's say he's got the season we're in. God is very much aware of the women that are in the spirit, who are in the church, even in other places. He sees us making a significant influence in determining where the nations are going. You see, this is at the end of the day, kingdom business that we're talking about here. And he's had women in leadership before. Esther did beautiful things. Deborah the judge did so many things. Without women, without Rahab, there would be no Jesus Christ as we speak. So the role of women has never diminished in God's eyes. It's a question of the time we're in right now. And he has built us, and me included. He has built us. He's taken us through our experiences, preparing us for this time. And I think if there are women who are resonating with what I am saying, then they need to realize it is now time to come out. If you've been sitting there with your political ambitions and wondering, is it time now? Is it? Jump in now. This is the time. Because God is ready now to provide all your resources. Don't worry about where the money is going to come from. If your calling is to go into leadership, go now or forever hold your peace. Because he is ready and he expects us to be ready too.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the discussion today. We're talking about women, politics, and the church. We're looking at that triangle and asking ourselves whether the church has a role to play in empowering women to enter politics. And as our guest has said, the church does have a role to play. The church needs to get involved in voter education, and especially in empowering women to vote and to play their role. Those of us who have a prophetic angle of things know that there have been many prophecies in the recent past about women rising. And we can see the manifestation. We can see in society, we can see in businesses, women, more and more women beginning to engage with business, more and more women beginning to do well and to flourish in business. And I believe that that's just a sign of that which God wants to do. So as my guest has said, if that is your call, and if that is what God is assigning you to do and God is challenging you to do, then it's time to begin to give heed to that call. You know, get sober men, get sober women around you, rally around people who speak the truth to you in love, and begin to chart out this call. It may not be a 1-year call, it may not be a 6-month call, it'll probably be a 5-year call, but begin to chart that path, and I believe the Lord will be with you. Otherwise, the Lord bless you and keep you, cause the light of his countenance shine upon you and give you peace. See you next Friday. Thank you.